Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, Groundhog's Day is the same thing year after year. Men regally dressed in top hats, gathered around a stump to watch an all-knowing groundhog predict the weather. If he sees a shadow, it's 6 more weeks of winter. We're teaming up with CityCast Philly to find out if there's any accuracy behind this centuries-old tradition, or if Punxsutawney Phil is just a groundhog who digs meteorology. It's Thursday, February 2nd. I'm Morgan Moody, and this is CityCast Pittsburgh. I'm with CityCast Philly host Trenae Nuri. Hello, Trenae.
Hey, Morgan. PA loves groundhogs, right?
I mean, I don't know if I love them, but yes, the state, it may as well be a state animal.
Right. We got Punxsutawney Phil, which we're going to talk about today, and also the cute little one, Gus, who is with the lottery.
Yeah, the second most famous groundhog in Pennsylvania is his tagline.
Morgan, what is Groundhog's Day?
Well, from my research, Punxsutawney is a town. It's almost 80 miles north of Pittsburgh. It's a population of like 5,000 people, so it's pretty small. Every year, though, on February 2nd, and I guess even leading up to the day, 40,000 people roughly descend from all over the world to celebrate a groundhog who predicts the weather. Is Groundhog's Day the most unreasonable holiday that we believe in? I know it's not a holiday, but we do celebrate, a fairy who takes our discarded teeth for cash. So
right, that's kind of sick. And we have the Easter bunny, a random bunny who gives us chocolate. I don't know. Groundhog's Day, it's one of those wild traditions, that we do celebrate specifically here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I remember like in elementary school, we talked about it when we were learning about the state of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And like all the quirkiness that this state has.
Yeah. Do you believe in this?
I actually do a little bit.
You're
I do.
a believer.
What about you?
I hung my hopes too many years on that groundhog bringing me a little bit of warmer weather. And I've been disappointed quite a few years, of course.
I feel like, though, it's because it's so many people at this event, he's scared.
You think it's the pressure? Yeah, it's the pressure. Yeah. This is his job. One day a year.
That's true.
He's supposed to bring us hopefully some good news. But then again, it is Pennsylvania and it is Pittsburgh. It is Philly. And I think we can only expect to have winter at least through March.
But Morgan, there are some believers and people who take a more logical approach to weather patterns. And we took that approach in our interviews. So, Morgan, you're the skeptic, and you talked to someone that's opposite of that.
Right. I probably spoke to one of the biggest believers, I guess, outside of you, Trenae. It's the guy who is Punxsutawney Phil's handler.
Wow.
Yeah, AJ Dereume. So he takes him out of the hole on the day. And I should mention, we're going to play some audio from our interviews. And AJ has a really big beard. So you might hear some scratching on his microphone on that tape. Just couldn't help it.
Okay, so tell me, how do you get a job like that, being Phil's handler?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. This actually isn't his day job, surprisingly. Working one day a year doesn't pay the bills, but it is something that runs in his family.
My great-grandfather was involved. My grandfather was in the inner circle, which are the 15 guys that wear the top hats like we do today. So I kind of grew up around it. And one of my dad's best friends was Phil's handler when I was growing up. And so I spent a long time, seeing that and always kind of thought, yeah, I hope I get to do that someday.
Yeah, the guys what is with all the top hats and the fancy outfits? Can you describe what the inner circle is? Yeah,
well, so anybody in the world can join the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club. It's like, you get a secret decoder pin in the mail and maybe like a monthly newsletter, things like that. But the Groundhog Club Inner Circle, it's kind of like the board of directors. And there's 15 individuals. We elect our own memberships, and you're in for life as long as you stay within the Punxsutawney area. But we essentially we have one job, one mission, and that is to perpetuate the legend of Punxsutawney Phil.
So basically, I talked to like the gang leaders of Groundhog's Day.
That is so cool, though. Like it's really cool to have family traditions that you could pass down. So on the flip side, I actually talked to Dr. Stam Zervanos, who's been studying groundhogs for decades. And he told me that the tradition of using the groundhog to predict weather actually started a long time ago. It's got roots in this like ancient Christian tradition where the priests, the clergy, would distribute candles during winter. And then the candles somehow represented like a long and cold winter. So then the Germans picked up the holiday and expanded it to using the hedgehog to predict the weather.
When the Germans migrated, some of the German migrations happened in the late 1700s to Pennsylvania, actually. And they found we don't have hedgehogs here, but we have groundhogs. So when they saw the groundhog, they just added the groundhog to that tradition.
Do you ever remember getting up and watching this coverage on the news before school?
Yes, I definitely watch. And remember, to our listeners, this is the time when, we didn't have Twitter. We barely had the school hotline for like weather. We had to like listen to see if our school was going to close, if there was a storm on the radio. So we would watch like the morning news, and the guys would be out there holding the groundhog like they did like in The Lion King, like, he's out and we will have, and then whatever the prediction was.
Yeah. Always something disappointing. Always, always more like 30-degree days, negative something degree days, certain amount of snow. Yeah. I also spoke with AJ about what Phil is doing during the year when it's not, the day where he is predicting 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring. And most of the year, he's living in a library with his wife, Phyllis.
Oh, a library. That's so cute.
Yeah, it's very cozy accommodations for a groundhog. But I guess in that habitat, he and Phyllis, they're not doing things that most groundhogs would do, like mating or hibernating. Really, the mating is what I was like very interested in, because I wanted to know if they're making this, these successions of Phils, who is next in line for the throne. And apparently they're not really doing that. They're not really mating because they're in the library, in that controlled environment.
Now, that's what the science, if you want to hear the not so scientific explanation, their bedroom has a picture window looking into the park and looking into the children's section of the library. So there's not a lot of romance happening if you...
Yeah. Hard to get intimate with kids around.
That's right. Yeah.
That is hilarious. So when I spoke with Dr. Zervanos, he told me that groundhogs that are in the wild are actually really hibernating during this time, and that, they don't come out into the spring to do their mating.
They spend about a week out of hibernation this time of the year. And then when they come out in March, they mate. And within 10 days, in our study area, within 10 days, 85% of the matings occur.
See, that's the problem. They've got Phil on our Gregorian calendar, and they've got his natural schedule all messed up.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, and not to bury the lead, but this Groundhog's Day is like really, really special.
That is right. Phil is being inducted. Phil is finally being given his flowers for his inaccurate weather predictions. The Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center actually inducted Phil as its 19th and final member into the Meteorologist Hall of Fame yesterday for Groundhog Eve for this year, which has to be a slap in the face to meteorologists who have studied for years and maybe are a little bit more accurate than Phil.
Well, how accurate is Phil?
According to his handler, 100% of the time.
Well, so Phil has never been wrong. When he gets out of, people form their opinion on how they think it goes down, but really, I pull him out of his stump. I set him on the stump. Phil and Phil alone decides whether or not he's seen his shadow, and then he communicates that, his findings to the president of the Groundhog Club. He's the only person in the world that can interpret groundhogese.
How long did it take to learn that language, or is it natural in Punxsutawney?
It's not natural to anyone except for the president, and they're able to interpret it through their possession of this ancient acacia wood cane. It's a wooden walking cane that's been passed down from president to president. And through the possession of that cane, that's what gives you those abilities. But it's kind of like the sword and the stone. Like you or I might pick that cane up, and you might look at Phil and he starts twitching his nose, and if you recognize what he's saying, then you would probably be the next in line to be the president of the Groundhog Club. I pick up that cane and it's just like another walking cane. So that's kind of how that works.
That's gotta be wrong.
I'm honestly trying to remember even a handful of times that Phil has even said that it was going to be an early spring.
Right.
I regularly tuned in to be disappointed.
Right. Well, Dr. Zervanos told me that, Phil is not a good way to predict the weather.
No. They're only right about a third of the time. So that's less than probability. I mean, that's less than 50-50.
Man.
Phil.
That's,
Phil.
He does it because he loves it, right? I don't know if he does it because he's an expert. But, according to the legend that the inner circle upholds, again, Phil is never wrong.
I'm also curious, though, Morgan. I asked Dr. Zervanos if it's the same groundhog that they've been celebrating all of these years. And if not, what's the lifespan of a groundhog?
It's usually 4 or 5 years. They could live longer. For example, Punxsutawney Phil, who's taken care of, can live maybe 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, so there's no way that it's this, it's not the same one.
Well, he's right. Phil is taken care of, very well taken care of. Phil probably has better digs than me. And I don't know if that's been the key, but it has brought him a pretty long lifespan up until this point.
The way it happened in Punxsutawney with Punxsutawney Phil, he actually found us around 1886 or 1887. And he's actually the same groundhog that has been in our care ever since then. The way it kind of happened here in Punxsy, there were a group of guys. They weren't the inner circle yet. They weren't the Groundhog Club. They were just guys that had an annual picnic where the feasted on groundhog. They literally went out and hunted groundhog in the morning and had a picnic in the afternoon. And they'd bring in dignitaries from around, from different areas. This was a big industrial center. A lot of coal was coming from here and going to Pittsburgh and the different and Buffalo and the different big coal centers. And so they used this kind of as a publicity type thing. And they did this. This wasn't uncommon in rural America at the time, these kind of hunts. Anyway, these guys were out one day at one year and they noticed a particular groundhog as unique. And that's when he became the guest of honor rather than the main course at that picnic. And that's Punxsy Phil. He's been with us ever since. So we don't need to worry about a succession line. We just need to worry about keeping care of the true seer of seers.
Right before this big event happens, this episode is going to be out. So what is your prediction, Trinae? Do you see 6 more weeks of winter, or are we in for an early spring?
I think we're in for an early spring because it's already getting a little bit warmer in Philly.
Can I be mad at you if you're wrong?
I'm not the groundhog.
Trinae, thank you so much for indulging us and walking down memory lane of many school mornings, watching this groundhog, hoping for better weather.
Thanks for having me, Morgan.
A little more news before you go. If you're still mourning the fact that the Steelers didn't make it to the Super Bowl this year, well, I've got some good news for you, or at least a consolation prize. Pittsburgh is getting a new sport to cheer for, and it's rugby. The Professional Sports League Premier Rugby 7 announced it's expanding to Western Pennsylvania with both a men's and a women's team. And because, we got to lean all the way into our industrial roots, the new teams are called the Pittsburgh Steel Toes. I thought it said stilettos, and I thought that would have been funny. The league's holding tryouts for the teams at Chatham on March 19th. And if you're more of a spectator, you can catch the Eastern Conference Finals at Highmark Stadium this summer. And Beyonce just announced her world tour. This is not a drill. She stops at Acrisure Stadium this summer. You might remember how bots and resellers left Swifties devastated and ticketless. It is not going to happen this time. You can register for the Verified Fan presale to make sure you get your hands on some tickets before the August 3rd show. That's all for today here on this Groundhog's Day on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, rate the show. Don't get mad at us if we've got 6 more weeks of winter. And maybe don't get mad at Phil either. He's trying his best. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city, so we'll see you then. Phil has some special powers, and maybe it's time that I acknowledge it.